Okay, this week we're looking at creating our intro paragraph, and when we're thinking about our intro paragraph, we are going to have four-ish sentences. So we're looking at that, and it says sentence one, general statements about the topic. You are not going to want to answer any questions. Your questions for the writing prompt is talking about, let me go back to it, I'm sorry. Your question to the writing prompt is asking you several things. It's asking you about the degradation of human spirit. It's asking you about the shining nobility of human spirit during Anne Frank's time, but it's also asking you about degradation of the human spirit and nobility of that human spirit during the coronavirus time. And so when I'm thinking about it, I write those words down. So if I sit here and I say, okay, let's move this over. If I say, I need to come up with my topic, I don't know what my topic is. So I'm going to take and look at that. So I have degradation, during Anne Frank. So during war. And then I also have degradation during the coronavirus. And then I have shining nobility, so B-I-L-I-T-Y, during war and during the coronavirus. Again, our introduction paragraph is not to answer any of those questions, so you should not have any answers to those questions in your introduction paragraph. That's not what an introduction paragraph is about. An introduction paragraph is to get us all on the same page as to where we're about to head. And so when we're looking at these, what is one thing that we can say that's happening during all of this? What's one? It's coming up with your topic. So if I was saying a Ford Focus, I was saying a Corolla, and I was saying a Altima. What are all of those? If I put all those in a category, what would my topic be? My topic's going to be cars. So my first two sentences is going to talk about what a car is, getting everybody on the same page. So if I'm sitting here looking at this, and here is everything we're talking about this, what does this fall underneath? What would our topic be when we are talking about war, coronavirus? Okay, so when we're coming up with our topic, we map it out. Most of the time, our topic is going to be in our writing prompt, and this one is in our writing prompt. So if we look at our writing prompt, we'll see that it is in our writing prompt, and it's talking about intimately and shockingly aware of war's greatest evils. But so we have right here war's greatest evils. We're going to have to take out, we're not just talking about the coronavirus is not war. And so we're kind of talking about greatest evils, but I struggle with the coronavirus being considered an evil. Thank you. And so Miss Powell and I made mankind's response in times of crisis, because that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about the degradation of human spirit during this crisis, the degradation of human spirit during the coronavirus. Remember the Corollas. We did a whole writing prompt on degradation. Over there, we'll see on the back board, humans are not participating in environmental degradation. So we've already really learned that word. And so then this is also talking about nobility during a time of crisis, how people stand out during a time of crisis, and how people are standing out now during a time of crisis. You all have to come up with that and look around you and see what is happening. So our first two sentences are going to be about the topic, mankind's response in times of crisis. And remember, you're writing that, you're telling people about mankind's response, what that means, and two general statements about that. You are not giving examples. You are explaining to your reader. Remember, you are the writer, so you're explaining to your audience what exactly the words mankind response is. response in times of crisis. Okay, so I'm making this in chunks so I don't spend a lot of time writing. So what that would look like if we're using the writing formula, it'd be 2 general statements about the topic. We've decided what our topic is, and so what our introduction paragraph would start with is, throughout history, mankind has faced many crises. The plural of crisis is crises. Not every person responds in the same way during times of trouble. So that's your first 2 sentences. That is truly introducing this. Now, I'm going to need you to take a second to go over to your writing prompt. We have to sort out what is important in this writing prompt. And if you'll remember when I made a 50 on that paper, and I asked the teacher why I made a 50 on one of Preston's paper, and she said because I didn't answer the question. I got so sidetracked in the entire writing prompt that I forgot to segregate out the section. So let's look at this. Segregate out the question, not the section. So the introduction to the published version of Anne Frank's diary, former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt said that Anne Frank's story made her intimately and shockingly aware of war's greatest evils, the degradation of the human spirit. At the same time, Anne's diary makes it clear the ultimate shining nobility of that spirit. Okay, so now the writing prompt is quoted for you all. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt's quote about the book. And so compare and contrast the degradation. Now our question is, compare and contrast the degradation and nobility of the human spirit during Anne Frank's time to the present in the midst of the coronavirus epidemic. If I'm really looking at that, does that have anything to do with First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt at all? Does my question ask me about Eleanor Roosevelt? Does my question talk about Eleanor Roosevelt? No. You could take off all of that, and your question is compare and contrast. And what does compare and contrast mean? Similarities and differences to the degradation and nobility of the human spirit to the present day myth. So as we have it up here, you are comparing the similarities and differences during the coronavirus and Anne Frank, to degradation and the Anne Frank Holocaust and coronavirus nobility, the great things that you see. And so it is not asking us about Eleanor Roosevelt. So our introduction paragraph does not have to talk about Eleanor Roosevelt. It doesn't make sense that it would talk about Eleanor Roosevelt at all, actually. If we start talking about Eleanor Roosevelt, like, let's think about this. We're asking about fries. My writing prompt is asking about fries. When you start talking about Eleanor Roosevelt and you get carried away with Eleanor Roosevelt, you're talking about potatoes. Well, I'm not asking you about potatoes. I'm asking you about fries. And so we need to stay on topic. And on topic is about coronavirus and Anne Frank, not Eleanor Roosevelt. If you start talking about Eleanor Roosevelt, then you are not answering the question. So now we go back to our writing prompt, and it says, in blank by blank, the author talks about blank. Now, you're going to see this is Anne Frank's diary, so Anne Frank is the author. So I'm going to take and put, and I'm going to pause this so I can go ahead and write it on the board. Okay, so we are now looking at our third sentence. Remember, on the third sentence, sometimes it's a little wonky. So you are going to use the writing formula to write your entire third sentence, put a period at the end of it, and then you're going to go back and read it to proof it to make sure it makes sense. Because when we're looking at the word the author talks about, sometimes the author doesn't talk about anything. Sometimes the author shows us, or you're going to have to play with the words just a little bit. But what this does is when we're sitting there and we're writing, and we're like, what am I supposed to put next? What is my next sentence? The writing formula does that for you. It tells you and shows exactly you're supposed to be. Then you play with the words to make it make sense. So let's do that. So in the diary of a young girl. Now you will see I have it underlined. This is a large piece of work. Remember, small pieces of work have quotation marks around it. Larger pieces of work, books have they're italicized. Well, I cannot italicize. I can pretend like I can italicize when I'm writing, and that's why I'm using an underline, but you're going to actually italicize there. By, and then you put the author here, and then remember you put a comma right there. The author talks about mankind. So, and then if you'll see on the writing formula right here, that by the author talks about, and you're to put the topic in there, the topic that you created down here. The topic that you're to put that entire topic in there. We forgot to create writing prongs, but we'll talk about that in just a minute. So let's fill that in. When we fill that in and we have that, let's read it again and make sure we put the entire topic that we created, that we came up with, and then we put a period. The reason we do that is it keeps us on track. If we are not careful again, if the writing prompt is asking us to write about fries and we start writing about potatoes, they're kind of similar, but we're actually not answering the question. The reason we do it this way is so it keeps us on track to actually answer the question. And so now let's read the sentence and make sure it makes sense. In The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank, the author talks about mankind's response in times of crisis. Is that not true? In this diary, the author is diarying, that's not a word. The author is writing about what she sees in mankind's response and her experiences. And so, yes, we can manipulate those words to say one of the things that Anne Frank talks about or discusses, or one of the things you see in her diary is, but for the basic sentence, that's an incredible sentence. It is what she is doing in her diary. Remember, it's written by her. It's her diary, just like you all are creating a diary this semester. So now we are going to do the topic and thesis prongs. The thesis prongs were right here. We had to write down at the beginning. You remember when you first start this process, where is my, oh, yes. When you first start writing, we are going to come over here. Let's write. So you're going to find the prompt, type it on a Google document. Did you do that? Did you type your writing prompt? And we actually did that for you. So your writing prompt is up top. Determine how many paragraphs. So below that, you know you had to have an intro. You know it's telling you to talk about degradation. You know it's telling you to talk about nobility. And then you're going to have a conclusion paragraph. But we're not grading your conclusion paragraph. So at least your intro, your paragraph on degradation, and your paragraph on nobility. We're now reading with a purpose. As we read, we are processing through, and every single time that we see something that talks about degradation, we're going to need to notate that on our document because there were things in PDF, so we can't highlight it. So if it were me, I would go to my document, and next to where I have, so if we did this, we would go intro. Remember on your document, you have your writing prompt up here. Then you have your intro, degradation, nobility, and then conclusion. So next to here, like let's say, for example, I found an example of degradation on page 92 in the diary. I'm going to come here and maybe notate to myself, page 92. And let's say I found an example of somebody just shining through with incredible character. I'm going to come here on my document and I'm going to put page 105. Those are not actual real examples, by the way, so do not, those are just me making it up to tell you as we are reading with a purpose, because we are always reading with a purpose. We are not just reading. We are to read with a purpose, and then we start writing. But we're not going to have to go back and find it. It will be impossible, or not impossible, but it'll be super hard to go back and find it. Now, we know that from this up here, we know that degradation and nobility are our thesis prong. So when we are creating that, when we are creating that last sentence, and I'm going to pause this so I can go ahead and get it on the board so that you don't have to watch me write. Okay, so I got it on the board. This is one of the hardest things to do. College students struggle with having to write a thesis statement, but the thesis statement is from Harvard's own online writing help. So it's okay that we don't get it today. It's okay that we don't get it tomorrow. That's why I'm helping you. Some of us get it and we rock thesis statements, and some of us struggle a little bit, but this is the way we're going to do it. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to look at the writing formula, and the writing formula says topic and thesis prong. So we remember that we simply write down, or type, used to be old school write down. We type those words. So here you see that I have mankind's response, and I didn't finish it. Like mankind's response, but we already have it in times of crisis up there. So it'd be kind of redundant to go in times of crisis, but maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. We're just going to leave it like that because it tells us in the writing formula, mankind, it tells us to put the topic. So we should really put the entire topic, but let's not be redundant. And then to put the thesis prongs. Well, we decided here that the thesis prongs were degradation and nobility. Well, degradation and nobility of what? We left off those words of what, and that was of the human spirit. So degradation of the human spirit and nobility of the human spirit. We cannot leave off those words. We have to remember that we're talking about the human spirit, and so that's important to put in there. So when we do our when we simply type degradation, our first prong, we put the word for this. We're going to put or. So a lot of times we put and then nobility, and then we're going to add of the human spirit. Now, we're going to put a period at the end of that. And when we're done, we're going to look and go, okay, what words can we add in between our topic and our prongs to make it make sense, to make it be a sentence? Again, what the writing formula is meant to do is it's meant to give you words to put on a paper that guide you to best practice writing. And remember, the best practice writing comes from Harvard's actual writing formula, and it's also what you'll be doing in high school. You're going to have to know how to do this. So it says, here is, my writing formula says, here is what you should have on the paper. Now, here are the words you should have in this area. Now make it make sense. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to read this, and we're going to put some words in between it so that we make it a sentence. So it says, mankind's response, blank, degradation and nobility of the human spirit. So I don't know why I was waiting. There's nobody here. I was waiting for an answer, but there's nobody to give me an answer besides me. So the verb, most of the time we're looking for a verb to put in there because we have a subject, we have direct objects, we have things like that, but we don't have a verb. So mankind's response, I'm going to go ahead and give you the answer since it's just me up in here. And show degradation or nobility of the human spirit. And when I read that, does that make sense? Now, what I want you to do is I want you to go with me as we read through this introduction paragraph and see if it sounds incredible. Throughout history, mankind has faced many crises. Not every person responds in the same way during the times of trouble. In The Diary of a Girl by Anne Frank, the author talks about mankind's response in times of crisis. Mankind's response can show degradation or nobility of the human spirit. That lets your reader know exactly what you're about to be talking about. It also gives us a setup for our main idea sentences on our next page. Here are your writing prongs, and that's your intro paragraph. I hope everyone's doing well, and I miss you very much.